Hello and welcome to Complementary Colors. We have a really special episode for you. We got to sit down with AJ Paron, a remarkable individual who serves as a true inspiration to so many designers. Her infectious energy holds the role of Executive Vice President at Sandow Design Group. She oversees business-to-business brands of Interior Design Magazine, Metropolis Magazine, and ThinkLab. Did I mention she's a design futurist for Sandow Design Group? Yeah, powerhouse. So we got to talk to her at the Sustainability Lab for Metropolis on the 11th floor of the Mart in Chicago. So we covered a lot of topics in our chat, but there was one gem that I just really wanted to shine a light on. When designing spaces for individuals with autism, specific design strategies can be utilized to create spaces that support unique learning and sensory needs for them. AJ wrote a trilogy ebook series on designing for autism. These ebooks are titled Interior Design for Autism from Birth to Early Childhood, Childhood to Adolescence, and Adulthood to Geriatrics. These books are awesome. I highly recommend listening to them as they give you really great neurofunctions of autism and offers really tailored design techniques for each of those phases. AJ is also the host of Once Upon a Project. Once Upon a Project is like a backstage pass to the world of interior design. You should definitely join her as she talks to designers about the creation of spaces, the spark of that inspiration, and the crazy hurdles we get to go through. Definitely hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did.
One thing I'd love some more definition on is, what is a design futurist?
You know, everyone asks me that.
I bet they do. I bet.
They're like, what's a design futurist? That is a cool title. And it is cool. I sort of made it up, but...
Hey, I love this.
But there are people that do have that title. There's actually a whole group of women that are design futurists. Where I am focused on is in the contract design market, specifically interiors, right? And so what I try and do is look at a lot of the research that we have about our segments, like, you know, what's hospitality designers doing, what's happening in healthcare, what's happening in all these things, and then marry it to general other larger growing trends. So what's happening with generations, what's happening with technology, right?
So
AI.
like forecasting.
Yes.
It's like you're a forecaster for the industry.
Well, or just finding those, what I call weak signals, and bringing them forward to say, hey, we should be thinking about this because you're looking at these elements that might be changing, and this is how we've always done things, right?
Right, but how do you make that big shift? Is you're the spotlight that's like, hey, this is how we should start to shift.
Which some people do not appreciate because they want things to stay the same. They're like, that's never going to happen.
I think we appreciate that.
There's some comfort in that, but it's nice to know that you're building that bridge to connect what is going to come. Is there one that you're really excited that you kind of shoved forward?
I think that for me, the next level up in design, like the next thing that we will be really focused on, is how do we make spaces become restorative?
I love that, yeah.
On a human-centric or on a like regenerative design?
Regenerative, like if you are a person and you are burnt out or you have an ailment, how do we have a space and all the sensory stimulation that you can control in that space actually leave that person in a better state than when they came? And that we haven't quite gotten there, but we're really close.
Oh, that's exciting.
I really think we're close. And there's a lot of, I'm working with Dr. Stephen Porges, who is like, he's amazing, and he's like 80, and he recently wrote this book called The Polyvagal Theory, and he invented the polyvagal theory.
Okay.
So it is this aspect of how your body reacts inherently to like fight and flight situations, but it's more than that. It's just, but it's how you're taking all of these sensory experiences, and if you've been traumatized or have had different experiences, how your body can have that.
Just an immediate reaction.
Yeah.
Subconscious reaction.
Subconscious reaction to it. And so we're looking at that from an interior standpoint because there is so much of that in an interior.
And it's so different for everybody.
It's very different.
We've been playing around with olfactory a lot lately in our spaces. Is there any part of that you guys have been working with that you guys are really using the senses of smell?
There's an amazing guy, and his name is Russell Jones, and he wrote this book called Scents.
Okay.
And he's a product designer, and what he does is he actually works on scents and smells and tastes and all these things for manufacturers.
Oh, wow.
Cool
job.
It's sometimes when you taste something, it's not about what it actually tastes like, it's how the crunch sounds.
I believe it. I mean, as a wine connoisseur myself, there is a lot that goes into how I appreciate wine. So I could
And a label, right? Oh, this is a pretty label.
Oh, look at the legs on her, yeah, for sure.
So there's a lot with olfactory. The thing that is challenging for many people is what may be great for you that you love that smell. Someone might think that's horrid, and that's true with a lot of things.
How do you have inclusivity, but then also you want it to have like the space we're in right now, Right. It is a little polarizing, but you want it to be. You want to make a statement in a way. So that is a rough line.
It is, and there's a challenge with that. And sometimes it depends on the activity and how much do you need a human being to perform or do something difficult in that space.
Yes, absolutely.
So if I had to take a test in this space, I would not go well.
The energy and the vibe is awesome.
It's like, okay, take a nap. I mean, I might be able to take a nap because it's NeoCon and I'm so tired. But this is a very stimulating environment and not conducive for other people, right?
That makes sense.
That's a great segue.
So we know that you have a really great history with neurodiversity. And you wrote, 3 books?
More than that, but 3 main books.
3 main books.
Yeah. Co-wrote many others.
And what was the name of them?
It's Interior Design for Autism, and it's based on age ranges. So depending on who you're designing for, you would select the appropriate book.
Awesome. So my question to you is, have you seen the design world successfully start to implement some of the things that you've researched?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question. You have to remember, when I started talking about neurodiversity, and this was 25 years ago.
I believe it.
When people thought I was crazy. And I did all this because my son was diagnosed when he was 3 with autism, and I was trying to figure out how to make him function in the world.
Yeah.
And at that time, people didn't even know what autism was.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to explain to someone that they can't be in this room,
right, for these
reasons,
it's
fighting,
yeah,
and they're not, he got kicked out of speech therapy when it took me 8 months to get him into speech therapy. And they're like, he's not performing. We're on our 3rd session and he's not performing. And I'm like, because you're having him try and learn speech in a gym full of people screaming.
Oh my God.
Go into a private room and work one-on-one, which they took him into the closet.
Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's all they had. And guess what? They're like, hey, he did better. I'm like, genius.
Closet.
So, because there's not kids screaming running around.
Listen to his mother.
Yeah. So, there's extremes, right? And what we talk about, let's just say in corporate America and in first world countries, we are talking a lot about neurodiversity, but you also have to remember in third world countries, literally, they take these children and they displace them.
Yeah.
So it is life and death situations for many individuals and many other cases. We've made some progress.
Good. I like hearing progress.
But I think where people get really challenged is there's a lot of people writing white papers and they're all very good intentioned. But many times a designer will read those white papers and go, that is really confusing. It's like you want to use bright colors and then you want to use no colors and you want to have stimulation and not stimulation. And I'm like, oh my God, no, that's not how you should be doing it. So think of it this way. If you need someone to be successful in an environment or learn a new skill, you have to be able to control every aspect of that environment. So I just got a call from our friends in Canada. And we
love our Canadians.
Our Canadians, yes.
Our cousins from the north.
So the director of this autism center called me and she said, AJ, we're working with these architects. Notice it's architects. I like architects too, but it tends to be architects that don't understand this from an interior standpoint, where interior designers actually do it much better. So the director's like, they came up with this color scheme that is the 4 seasons. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's what I said.
I'm seeing where this is going.
Right?
I'm sorry.
Okay, tell me more. She's like, they're really bright colors and I'm worried about that. I'm like, okay, do you want me to call them? She's like, yes. I'm like, I'm not going to charge you or anything, but we're going to have...
Okay, tell us this phone call. How did the phone
come to
call go?
Jesus,
Oh, I'm
right?
ready.
Like, here we go. So, first of all, he couldn't figure out Zoom. So that was the first thing. But once we all got on the call, and I was like, tell me what you're doing. So they're showing me everything. I said, listen, it's great that you come up with this wonderful concept that, like, you and I might appreciate.
Can relate to.
The kids do not care, and it makes no difference for them. And you need to treat the classrooms as sacrosanct. It needs to be neutral. The teachers can add color. The teachers can, do all these things. They have all these big windows, and I'm like, what's the view at the window? Is it traffic? Is it, can they see people walking around? You need to frost it. And they're like, well, we're gonna put up blinds. I'm like, no, you can't put up blinds. If you put up blinds, they will destroy the blinds. Believe me, 100%. I've been there. And they're like, but they have no cords now because it's illegal to have cords. It doesn't matter. They will tear those things down and they will be done. And I'd give it 48 hours. 48 hours.
Some confidence in us.
And they were like, oh. And I'm like, yes. So frost it 3/4 way up so you still get the sun and that kind of the blue sky. But we found that to be really successful.
That's great.
And then we started talking about like how to change it. Like certain areas. Sorry, I'm digressing for a second. You know how when people talk about neurodiversity and design to neurodiversity, they say, if we design for this child or this individual, then everyone does better.
I wish that was the case.
And it's not. Because in a classroom, we have to make them so controlled and so neutralized and very just very neutral environment in every way that what happens is all the paraprofessionals, all the teachers are so desensitized, they're like craving color.
Right.
So then you have to do the opposite for them in their spaces. You have to go like 2 levels up for them when they have their their private offices or their
So get that pendulum.
That teacher's lounge.
because otherwise it's too none of us would like that.
Right.
And here's the other thing. If a family has to decide what school to choose, what are they going to choose? They're going to choose one that looks kid-friendly and fun and bright. They don't want to ever send their child to a place that looks institutional.
Or sterile is the word we hear.
Which many times those places are. So you have to decide where you can bring in intensity and color, where it makes sense. And the kids, like outside of the building, the kids don't have to perform outside of the building. They don't have to learn anything. They just have to walk in the door. That's all they have to do is walk in the door. If you can get them to walk in the door, great, but it can be fun and colorful on the outside. If they're not, that's not their learning environment. And then you have to look at patterns. And so, yes, I had to give them a crash course in 30 minutes.
Good.
They made major progress.
Great.
But then I still had to pick out some colors, but that's okay. And so the director's like, okay, we're in a much better place. I'm like, bring me in earlier on the next project, please, because they're ordering product.
With that, when you're talking about how much you neutralize the space and really desensitize it, do you work in autonomy as well for the space? So light control, you talked about putting in frost, how much autonomy do you give the space, or do you just take that away so that you're giving the kids the best opportunity?
Well, it comes down to control, right? So if you can, sometimes you want it to be brighter or you want the lighting to be controlled in a different way. What we have to be careful on is the transitioning. If you go from very dark space to a very light space, that can be actually
Triggering.
a hard trigger for people, and they don't want to walk into that space.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I worked on an adult care center where they left all the lights off all day long in the center, in the rooms that the adults were in, because the flickering lights of the fluorescents were bothering them.
Yeah.
They didn't know
That
what to
makes
do.
sense.
So they just left it. So they were in a cave. And then they had to go out into this bright hallway and then go into a bright lunchroom, and they had so many problems with transitioning. And I'm like, well, duh.
Yeah.
Hello, you're going from a dark cave to like anyone can figure that out. So we had to make things very even keeled across the trans. So we recently did that in a state-of-the-art new autism center, and it really helped the kids with the transitions.
That's
From not going from a shocking, it's contrast. You don't want high contrast.
You are designing as controlled as you possibly can, but it's within those transition spaces that you're allowing that autonomy more to exist as they come out of that environment. So maybe it's both.
It has to do all about performance.
There you go. Okay, that's a better way to put it.
Now, if you work in behavioral therapy, when you are trying to train the brain, if you get an individual to master a skill in a controlled environment, the next step is to master the skill in an uncontrolled environment.
Nice.
That makes sense. So to give those different progressive
So you have to have options, because if you can get somebody to really focus, like for instance, if you're trying to get a kid to learn to go to kindergarten, you have to have a variety of seating where sometimes when you start working with them, you have to actually be behind the child manipulating their hands because that's all they're tolerating. And then the next progression is we sit like this, side by side.
And they like mirror.
And then the next progression is we sit this way. And then we can imagine a teacher standing up in the front of a classroom now teaching. They're now used to this.
The light bulb is like, well, yeah,
Right.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because their house is going to be different.
Baby steps.
Yeah. And so you have to be able to give those options, and so you can, and every child might be in a different stage. So if you don't have those options available and you can only sit across or only sit by side,
then it's not going to be successful.
Exactly.
Understood now.
Yeah. I don't know if you had more poignant questions, but I would chase this further, this like the boundary of a project. Did you have?
No, I did. I wanted
Great.
to make sure I asked you about that neurodiversity
Yeah.
because it's one that I know that we talk about a lot because of our open office. It's like too loud, too quiet, too boring, too stimulating, too everything all at once.
And I'll try not to get too passionate about this, but
Oh, you better get
like
passionate.
cheers. Go
That's
for
what
it.
we're here for.
Help us.
what drives me insane
Okay.
Pop off, girl.
is, okay, my son is very much on the spectrum, right? He's very affected. He's doing great. Good. He's an artist. He makes amazing artwork. He will speak on stage, very poorly, but he will speak on stage for 500 people, no problem.
That's
Not
amazing.
5 people. Doesn't want to do that. It's got to be 500 people or more. Don't ask me why. But
He knows his value.
Yes,
he's
he's
like,
like,
I don't do this
I'm
for
worth 500.
people.
yeah, big audience, not small, big audience. But he would never be accepted into an office environment because he stims all the time. And he walks back and forth, and he can't sit still. And if he can function, but it would never be socially acceptable. And so we talk about neurodiversity in the workplace.
Yeah.
It is a section of the spectrum.
Right.
That can really be,
A
and it's
sliver.
not necessarily really inclusive.
Yeah.
Because some of it's a policy issue, some of it is honestly a tolerance issue. I have a young man that I've been helping with who is in Minneapolis, and he is the most talented Revit designer. Won all these competitions.
Nice.
He has Asperger's and Tourette's pretty badly. Swears a lot.
Oh, okay.
Says very inappropriate things to people.
So he fits right in with construction.
I don't know where you're going with this.
Just saying.
No.
You're like, what's the problem?
I see no issues here.
I'm on the CA part of the job.
Exactly. He's gone on over 300 interviews to architectural design firms that will not hire him because they're like, oh, we know. I'm like, I will come in and explain everything. We've got a really great job coach, but it's work. It's work on their end. They have to have a mentor that be working with him, so making sure that he understands what he's doing. Nobody wants to invest in that. And these are the same firms that are like, hey, we'll do your neurodiversity project. And hey, I just wrote this white paper for you. And we're
That's so
experts, but
interesting.
we'll not hire someone. And he needs to be in a physical, he needs friends, he needs social, he can do anything. Like, he could work for all these Chinese manufacturers for Revit, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere remotely. He needs to go in and be social.
Well, don't we all need connection?
Yeah, it's mental health,
yeah.
right? So it really irks me when people are like, let me know. There's so much more work to be done, and I see all the work that needs to be done. I celebrate people trying to learn, trying to educate. Are people perfect? No. Are we getting better? Yes.
That's good.
I'm really excited about IWBI came out with an equity rating. I don't know if you guys saw that yet.
Yes, actually, yes.
I helped with the
creation
information
of it,
and
of course.
creation of that, along with many others. And Dr. Angelita Scott, who really led that, she was actually a past student of mine. So
Wow.
she's amazing.
I do feel like the new Just label also has a lot more.
The thing that's missing that I think the profession needs to focus on for everyone is to give more examples of how to do things, right? Because people are like, oh, we need to make a sensory room. And then I see these things on TV, they're like, oh, they put a sensory room in this new bulk stadium. And they're like, did you do that, AJ? And I look at it, I'm like, oh my God, no, that is not me. Oh my God, they did everything wrong. But, you know, there's some, we need to show examples. We need to show case studies. We need to show, not a prescription because everything's different, but applications of like, this is how you would handle this, and this is what's worked 100 times out of 200, so you should consider it, right? We're not doing that.
Right. I do think that there is something very siloed still about our industry as a whole, and it's like inner vernacular, I think. So I wanted to kind of lead us to talking about like project boundaries. You know, whenever you're doing like LEED or we always kind of start with like, well, here's the boundary, whether it's the walls of a structure or, hey, now we're doing a campus, or here's like a community. But we always boundary, and we think in like that kind of vertical space instead of thinking in systems. When you flat out just said like, the pedestrian traffic outside of a window, the system of that community is just as integral as the flooring selection in the room. And so this, I do think, because the way you just described that was like, it's kind of how when clients ask for a wellness room and you're just like, oh, because that's going to be wellness for the full facility when there's a meditation space. Do you know what I mean?
Or
It's
nursing
like,
place.
But I was going to say they loop it into the mother-baby room too, so it's like a twofer.
Right. And so then you're like, well, that's not necessarily integration. It's this weird way we boundary, you know, or because it's maybe that's the way program starts, is pockets of things instead of like an interwoven system.
And that's the thing. It drives me nuts too when people are talking about let's institute a wellness program, but this is the same organization or company that are texting people till 3 a.m. in the morning and expecting a reply. It's like, you need to really think about your whole ecosystem, not just your space, but your whole ecosystem. Are you giving paternity leave? Are you, all these things. How much are you giving for bereavement leave? 2 days, your mom died? I'm sorry, 2 days, that's what you got.
I agree with you. And there was this terminology just at ILFI's conference like a couple weeks ago, and it hit me so hard, and I want to know, because it feels like it falls right in line, but the human asset, humans and like us, the community, because we talk about how community is so important and building connection, but we don't necessarily, we see us as the users, and that our space we're creating is the asset we're talking about, when really we are the asset. Like, what is the asset? So what is the asset of autism? The different perspective of that could actually teach a space versus how can the space teach? So I just wanted to know, like, the human asset that you've been dealing with or promoting, what is another thing kind of you see uprising? Like in this futuristic, like pushing forward, like this asset, whether it's policy or it's, but something that is, not something we're touching, but something that's teaching us.
Well, I think some of it has to do with how people are looking to self-soothe, right? And, I brought up earlier, we were talking about how we need spaces to rejuvenate us, to restore us. And there's definitely people that have learned for them to get in a groove and for them to like really focus and be highly productive, they need a certain recipe around them. And that has been weird in past eras, right?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
what is that person doing over there? And
That's a good point.
right? It's like socially not accepted. And I think, there's more places that, I mean, honestly, Europe is a lot more accepting than America. Like when we just we were just in England, and we have it here too, but nobody knows what it means. It is the sunflower program where you wear a lanyard, like your NeoCon lanyard, and it has sunflowers on it. And everyone in England knew what that meant. And everyone respected that, to the point where when my son was waiting for us to get off our computers at a coffee shop, and we were kind of close to a train station, and we were like, just go walk around, look at stores, go walk around.
Yeah.
He was walking close to the tracks, so they shut down all the trains
Oh my gosh,
because they were worried.
Goosebumps.
That's
Yeah.
so sweet.
and they knew.
Because
that is such
they
a
didn't
great
ask
example.
him or nothing. And then I was like, did you not see he was coming up to me? You didn't have to shut down the trains. I was like mortified because it was rush hour. Like that would never happen in America. But it was pretty amazing that they did that. And they were like, oh, no problem. And I was like, oh, turn them on. People are waiting. So, but we let him wander anywhere as long as, and he calls it his name tag. Puts on his name tag, and he knows, he feels safer with it on. And I was like, gosh, I wish I could.
That's great.
That would be accepted in America, Some of it is just the acceptance of it too. I mean, we're very polarized, as you all know, and we see this all the time in our projects too, right? It's like you're trying to talk to a client about doing sustainable things, and they're like, nope, this person is like anti-sustainability, climate change. So you have to then switch your tactic and get them to choose some of these for different reasons. Like, hey, this is local. You want to support the local economy, don't you?
Right.
Yes, I do. And so, it's like you have to like put some broccoli in with the...
I know our economy is built on oil and gas.
As
so
you
we
know.
Totally get it.
Yeah.
It's always later when you're like, guess what good thing you did on accident and we did on purpose. It's always like when they don't want to talk about it, we're like, well, we're going to do that anyway and tell them about it later.
And they're always very proud.
And
But
they're
we do
always
sneak it in.
proud. After you sneak it in,
It
they're
is
proud.
true,
Yeah.
but because then there's a story that they can use for marketing and their employees, and then they're happy. But yeah, there's some things there that I think there's work to be done, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, what's unfortunate is as you're describing this name tag, I'm like, it's no different than a medical alert bracelet.
Right.
Why wouldn't, I know I have friends who are, desperately diabetic, and if something happens, they're going to need immediate care. Or like my husband is allergic to antibiotics. Like you have to know these things. So like you wear the medical alert bracelet so that people know how to take care of you. Mm-hmm. Why is that not just normal in general?
Well, I think it's this lens, of the fact that we are seeing it more as a whole, like that.
And there's
it
a lot
helps.
more, yeah.
Yeah, and
There's a lot more.
I think that, gosh, if that's how we would start conversations, it's almost like instead of being so, it's like preventative almost. Instead of being so reactionary, I think like it is understanding who we are as a society, and that's getting more and more specific,
Yeah, and not judging, right?
Yeah.
And here, we're all designers. We judge for a living,
That's
right?
the point.
We're like, that's really ugly. That's terrible. Oh my gosh, who would ever do that? Why did they do that? That's terrible. Nobody likes that, right? I mean, you can't help yourself because that's what we do. But at the same point, having a different person's point of view, I mean, I just heard there's a movie coming out where and I've been lobbying this for like 10 years. There's a movie coming out it's a story about something else, but they have a child with autism that is a child with autism.
Great.
That plays, and I'm like, thank God. Because, I mean, there's been actors that have played it very well, but you have a whole community there that you can pull from. And they went through like 200 video interviews till they found this kid who's perfect. And so I can't wait for this movie to come out. But it's that representation.
Yeah.
When
Yes.
people have exposure and they have more representation,
Yeah.
they think differently and go.
They do.
And here's my thing. As designers, our job is to storytell, right? And if we storytell, what happens is people build empathy. And when they have empathy, when they're faced with a decision or a choice, they may choose differently based on the stories that we share, like on your podcast.
Yeah.
Or situations they might see and hear about and go, oh gosh, I remember that. And make a different
intelligence.
Yeah, and make a different decision. And that's why I share stories so much, because I want the world to be a better place. You know, the more that we have representation and get the stories out, and as designers, that's our job too. Absolutely. Because they're thinking what they know. It's like if you go and design a space, and it's a school or a hotel or whatever, they've had to take the space that they've always had and just make do, and that we do workarounds. Like, oh, it's actually not big enough for the reception, but we're just gonna make it work. And they're just always used to workarounds, and then you say, hey, we're gonna build a new building for you now. What do you want? How do you want it to be? And they're like, I have no idea.
Right.
Because all they've been used to is workarounds, and they can't even imagine something being better.
Best client. Like,
right?
Yes, because they're just so grateful, and you're like, want to give you everything.
Yeah. Anything you want, we give you.
But you have to climb inside their mind to really pull out what they need. And it can be a little hard, but once you've done it, it's amazing. Like, they're so appreciative.
I just recently, and this is just going to show, like, I guess we're always learning something, but diversity, inclusion. Recently, I heard the B added, belonging, and I was like, that allows. There's always, even though your son is probably speaking a separate story, when you're describing these grown men that are just like sobbing because they have empathy, who knows what it's touching really inside their own story, but there is this sense of belonging together, and so. I think it is important to learn our differences, and have that diversity, but that belonging, it just like, I was like, oh, that it feels right.
And we're all kind of knocking on this door by talking about stories and projects and all this stuff. You have a podcast, right?
I do.
About all of these
podcast.
stories. And whatnot. I would love to hear some more about that.
So it's called Once Upon a Project. And the whole idea of it is like, I work for Interior Design Magazine, Metropolis Magazine, Design Milk, so it's always these beautiful images of these gorgeous...
The ones that we drool over.
Right?
Like,
gorgeous projects on the covers, in the magazines. But some of the best interior design stories those projects would have never made it on a cover or ever be published. But they're amazing stories of impact and how someone was changed, or just they're crazy. Like, some of them are heartfelt, some of them will make you cry. So the podcast is really talking to designers, mainly in contract interior design, and to tell those stories of like, here's a crazy project that I never thought I would ever work on, something like this. Or we had this client ask us the most weird thing, and you're never gonna believe what happened on this project. I almost got arrested because, things like that. So, but I mean,
the color.
The color.
The color.
People don't understand what we do.
Sure.
The general public does not understand what we do. It's hard to explain what we do and how we go about doing it, and
why we do it.
Yes, and why we do it, and
Why we put ourselves through this.
Yeah, all of that, and and that's okay. But telling those stories especially like a budding designer, they think design is something else, and then they get out of school and they're like, wait a second.
Yeah. What
And then like 5 years in, their EQ is elevated because they're like, oh my gosh, it's all psychology actually.
I did go through, when I was doing residential design, I did have 3 divorces. Not mine, but clients.
I went through one.
Yeah, so clients. So it is a lot
Or
of
you end
psychology.
up like rebranding like through your design, huge companies, and you're like, oh wait, I recognize all of that in your brand. So like, you are reinventing, whether it's corporate or whatever it is.
Well, on that note, we want to ask everybody a tip and trick that you have for everybody attending NeoCon.
Oh.
Do you have like
Surviving.
a secret
Surviving
survival tip?
Survival tip? Oh gosh. Well, it's all about the shoes, right? Yes. I'm sure you've heard that 100 times. Because we're like in our flip flops. One of the things that it's really easy to like go to NeoCon, but if you don't do things in the moment, like you meet somebody or see something and actually exchange information in an email or whatever in the moment, you will never remember or get to it when you come back.
It is so true.
Ever. It'll be gone from your mind. Like,
Absolutely.
Right?
I can't even remember the color that person was wearing.
Who was that person? Nicole? Who?
Or taking pictures.
Yes, you have to take
What was the picture?
What you have to do is before you walk in the showroom, you take a picture of the showroom sign and then everything that you
Great
paid.
tip. That's a pro.
Yep. And even if you don't end up taking a picture in the showroom, you're like, oh, I won't take any pictures. And then somebody will pop something out. Oh my God, what's that? And click. And you have no idea. So you have to take a picture of every showroom that before you walk into, so that you know in your camera reel where you were and what you did.
Yeah, the walkthrough.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you didn't take a picture in there, don't use that company.
Well, thank you so much for taking time. We really appreciate you.
You guys are amazing. You're doing amazing things. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes,
oh,
thank
thanks,
you.
ladies.
Complementary Colors is a production of MCG Explore Design, an architecture and interior design firm located in beautiful Anchorage, Alaska. If you'd like to hear more future episodes, be sure to subscribe to Complementary Colors wherever you find podcasts.